Welcome to my channel. The channel that I still call Work in Progress. Still, we're on a kind of new in the sense of not being around for very long, adventure, we could call it, where I'm hoping to gather together people to share their stories about their life's journey. Everyday people just like you and me, where we can have a conversation on Zoom and record it and put it on this channel, where we share all of the different ways that we've been able to maneuver, if you will, or get overcome challenges, work our way through this life, whatever it's been, to be able to share our personal stories of how we've managed through this life's journey. I think the stories are what's most important that we can share, because that's how we're going to really, really help one another. And in today's world right now, we need help. As we go through this evolutionary process, we really need to be not only open to, but motivated to really help one another. So that is still my vision, that we can gather enough of us together to have a conversation, to share with one another, and to watch that grow. So, having said that, if this appeals to you, my contact information is right below this video. So I encourage you to contact me, give me a holler, and let's have a conversation. So today's video is going to be about something that I'm kind of just brainstorm with, because I don't really have a good insight or a good answer, but I believe it's something that we all struggle with, or most of us. I shouldn't say we all, but many of us struggle with. I happen to be in the category of struggling with it. And I'm calling it self-talk. What is our self-talk? But it's along the same lines of so much is talked about today about loving ourselves, being kind to ourselves, which I say at the end of my videos. So I've been working on this. I really have. I don't understand it on a deep level. I wish I did, but I don't. But I can talk about some of the things that I've been trying to do that may possibly help one of you out there. And perhaps some of you might want to comment, because you've maybe been able to achieve this thing I'm calling self-talk. So for me, self-talk has really been a big part of my life for really, I can't remember when it hasn't been. And what do I mean by that? How did I talk to myself? And how was I being talked to? And I've talked about this in other videos, growing up in a reasonably, I don't know why I'd use that word, in a emotionally abusive environment. And that, where I was the one that was constantly being told, I didn't even need self-talk, because my mother was that self-talk for me. And what happened, what I did with that is I mentioned this before, so I'm not going to go into the whole story, but I had this keyhole in the door to my bedroom, and I would speak to the keyhole and say, I'm not who they say I am. And somehow I was connected to my guide or guides, and that's how I survived, because I was only told about how bad, dumb, not worth. That's what I was told. And I knew somehow inside of myself I didn't want to believe that. So I would say to that keyhole, I'm not who they say I am. And there's a whole other conversation around that, about how I grew up, and used that in ways that eventually probably weren't serving me very well, but at the time it did, because had I been really taking in what I was told, I'm not sure how I could even be here today. So that was evidently my survival mechanism, and so it helped me in that way. However, on a deeper level, it obviously took hold in my body and my being. And so throughout the years then, particularly as I became a young adult, teenager too probably, I started this self-talk that was always not a whole lot, well, maybe not even as good, maybe worse than what my mother was saying. I don't know. But I wasn't really aware of it, at the time. I thought it was really more about I demanded a lot of myself. So if myself wasn't performing in a particular way, then, that self-talk would be pretty abusive. I heard somebody on a video the other day say that, that their self-talk or his self-talk, it was worse than he'd talked to his worst enemy. So certainly I'm not alone in this, and either are you. This way of treating ourselves, and it all comes from other programming, which is crazy, It's crazy that we weren't an environment, or haven't been. I can't speak for today's kids, but I think I don't know what I think. I'm not going to speak to that because I'm not sure. But for sure, of my days, and maybe yours, this talk to us, whether it be from our teachers, our parents, our siblings, our friends, I don't know. It just wasn't set up to help a young person develop in a positive way. It was rather about, this competition, or do you get good grades? And if you don't, then you're shamed. And I was one that I did not like school. School was not my thing, so I was very much suffered through that process. And that gave my mom a lot of ammunition because I hated school. I didn't want to be there. It just wasn't my style of learning. So that definitely gave her the ammunition to tell me what she felt like, put it that way. So anyway, today I still struggle with this. Now, it's weird because, and then maybe it's not weird, maybe this happens for you too, but there's some things that I'm okay with. For instance, I'm doing this video. And I'll listen to it. I always listen to it after I do it, just to make sure, one, that it, recorded correctly before I go through the upload to YouTube. And also, when I'm doing these videos, I am kind of in the moment. I don't know how to explain it, but I don't really feel it's me so much speaking, but more my higher self speaking through me. So when I listen back to these videos, I know then what I spoke about, because I don't always, when I'm in this moment right now, I can't put it all together. It's just in a flow. So I'm not saying that when I listen back, I'm there's times I go, oh my God, I hate my hair, or I don't know if that made sense what I said, but I don't get lost in beating myself up with that for some reason. Gotta take a sip. So the thing that I do know, and I'm sure you'd agree, abusive self-talk isn't helping us. And what I've begun to look at is if I can't accept myself, and we need to talk who is the self, then how can I accept anything else that's in my life, or really anyone else? So the first thing we need to look at is who is this self that I'm talking to? And in other words, who's talking and who's receiving this abusive talk. It's abusive language. It's abusive way of dealing with me. Well, it is still all ego-driven. In other words, when I'm feeling that I need to be abusive in my self-talk, I'm very well connected to the false self, to the ego. So I'm thinking I'm that. I'm believing in the moment that I'm that character in the movie, and that who something else is another me, which doesn't make sense either, right? Is doing the self-talk, or it's just a self-talk. In other words, I'm this character in the movie. I'm the false self, and I'm telling myself, false self, what a bad person I am, how dumb, how, well, basically, how could I even just be here? You know, I'm so awful in what I do or don't do that how can I even get up in the morning, really? That's where the self-talk can be insane. Yet, we all do it, and probably to varying degrees, you know? And in doing that, we also try to not have to feel the feelings around what we're feeling about ourselves. So we get in this cycle of, you know, trying to numb ourselves. We do it in all different ways. It can be through food, through alcohol, through drugs, through overworking, through being a workaholic, through well, you know all the ways, so I don't need to try to name all of them, but we're in this fight, catch-22, we're doing this self-talk to the false self, and we're not wanting to feel those feelings that we're telling ourselves because they feel awful. And so then we start to find ways to numb those feelings, and it's a catch-22. We're just in this loop, you know? So as I've been kind of trying to peel the onion, so to speak, and look at this from varying places, from varying points of view, I'm saying, well, how does this thing unravel? Where does it begin? Where can I begin to kind of get just a little bit of handle on this and begin to see deeper than just this, you know, false self that's a bad person? So, as I mentioned, for some reason, doing the video thing that I'm doing or the YouTube, I'm able to do that. But other things that really are a trigger for me and cause this self-talk are kind of simple, ridiculous things. For instance, I mentioned before in some other videos, I'm not a cook. My thing isn't cooking. I don't love cooking, and I don't feel intuitive at all cooking. So I feel very out of, you know, my realm. And but at the same time, I will cook to a certain degree, and there's certain things I think I do better than others. Like I think I do soups pretty good sometimes, except when I don't do them well. And then I have this whole other thing about when we entertain, even though it's most of the time my husband who's doing the cooking because I'm too uncomfortable to do that. And should the meal not come out right, which can happen, right? Even though he's a really good cook, you know, we might try something new, or I don't know, something didn't come out right, or the timing wasn't good, or it can, you know, dinners can go 100 different ways, and I want perfection. When we're entertaining, I want to have perfection. So there is a time of hugely abusive self-talk. And I can be upset for literally days over something like, for instance, it could just be this happened not too long ago, I made chicken soup, which I make, that's the one thing I'll make more often. But I don't know, I wasn't focused and it didn't come out right, and it was just for my husband and I, so it's not like we had company. But I just was so abusive to myself about this. It was days, literally, that I was suffering over the way that this soup didn't come out. And even when I'm in the suffering, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, This is crazy. My husband's saying, I don't know where you're coming from. I think it's fine. That kind of thing. But it doesn't matter what he's saying. It matters, where am I going with this? So that's an example of what can really, it's a trigger. Obviously, it's a trigger of some type of performance for me that triggers this reaction from my self-talk. Everybody's different in where they are triggered to be hard on themselves. For me, any type of testing, even at the DMV, you go to get your driver's test when we've moved and so forth, or to different cities. So that kind of test. So I freak out over it because I, again, wasn't good in school or didn't care for school. So I have this test anxiety. So it doesn't matter what it's going to be for the test. I set up this perfection, and if I'm not perfect in it, then the suffering happens and I torture myself with the self-talk. So those are just a few examples to give you an idea of what I do. And, it can happen so easily during the day. Maybe I had a conversation on the phone with somebody and I think I said something stupid, or a neighbor, or, it wasn't appropriate. I have the whole thing about being appropriate, to be a certain way, is or is not appropriate. So there's all of these rules that I've come to live with or come to believe, and that is where I can get into this abusive self-talk. So now what I'm looking at is when I catch myself, which I can usually catch myself now, getting into that, getting into that experience of where I want to beat myself up verbally, I begin to say, well, can I just switch roles here for a minute and see what it feels like to receive this self-talk? So in other words, I'm removing this situation. Instead of being hugged up on the soup story, for instance, I'm saying, wait a minute, let me just become the receiver of this self-talk that's going on in my mind, and let me see how that feels, and can I just notice, is this really a requirement for the fact that the soup didn't come out perfect? And the truth is, what does it feel like to receive this kind of talk? So I've been trying that, because we're not going to convince ourselves or talk ourselves into that we're okay with ourselves. We're just not. It doesn't work that way. Affirmations don't work. I mean, they certainly haven't for me, and for most people, I don't think they do. Maybe in the moment they help you feel better, but they're not going to result in better self-talk on a regular basis. And so it really is trying to see, feel, come and get in touch with what is really underneath all this and what is going on, and to kind of remove oneself from the situation at hand. So rather than looking at what it is that I'm beating myself up over, verbally beating myself up over, rather than hold on to that, is it something that I said to someone on the phone? Did I not, handle a particular situation appropriately? All this stuff. Can I go deeper and say, well, what does it feel like to be talked to this way? So that's helped me somewhat to be able to feel the results of being talked to that way, and then weigh it out and say, did my behavior deserve to be spoken to that way? Because was my intention to not be appropriate? Was my intention to make soup that wasn't going to be good? Or have a problem taking a particular test? Was it my intention to do those things? Because when I'm listening or feeling what it feels like to be spoken to that way, I get that, wait a minute, it was never my intention to be a bad person, you know? Never. And so then that can start to help me release a little bit of being so hard on myself. And that's really what we are. We're being hard on ourselves, not just harsh to ourselves, which we're being, but we're hard on ourselves because we have a certain expectation or a certain rule that we've made up in terms of what makes us a good person or a bad person. We're not looking at underneath that to say, well, what was my intention? I have a weird thing with wine. I like my wine at night. But I don't like to drink a certain amount because then I don't feel well the next day. I don't mean getting drunk. I'm a control freak, so getting drunk would be outside of my control. So it's not like that. But it could be just, an extra half glass of wine that I may be tempted, sometimes I am, to have in the moment. And then I feel kind of crappy the next day. And so the next day what I'm doing is I'm looking, because of course I'm not finishing a bottle of wine, but I'm looking how much I drank. I'm measuring. And that's going to mean if I'm a bad person or a good person. And I see myself doing this, and I know even to me it seems kind of crazy, but at the moment it doesn't, because then I'm judging myself through that lens. And so some of this stuff is so simple and so, crazy. And I see it for what it is, but I can't necessarily shift in the moment. So the first place probably is just becoming aware. That's what I feel. So I have been really noticing and becoming aware of how many times a day I think of myself as a bad person. And I'm trying to really look at that now from what is my intention? And who's doing the judging? And then, of course, who's this person, this false self? So it's almost like kind of crazy. This is the false self is that I like to call it the make-believe friend. So I'm beating up this make-believe friend that doesn't exist. And who's the I that's beating it up? Oh, the ego. Okay, so how does this work, But in the meantime, what does it do? What does work is it makes me uncomfortable. It makes me feel crappy during the day. It's certainly not self-esteem building. And I don't know that we need to do that either, build self-esteem. We need to be accepting of exactly who we are. Because I do know one thing, none of us have an intention of doing something stupid or wrong or to hurt others or hurt ourselves. That's not our intention. Our intention 100% of the time, I believe, is to definitely do the best we can do. That doesn't mean we do it, but that's an intention. There are extremes to that, I'm sure, for people that are having anger issues and so forth, so maybe they have an intention of really wanting to get back at somebody, I don't know, but that's a different category in my mind. I'm just talking about everyday people like you and me that are struggling with self-talk. So that's my idea right now, is if I can just roll it back and really say, one, what was my intention? Well, my intention was make a good soup. Okay, then you did your best. And no biggie. You know what? It's no biggie, because life goes on and everything shifts, everything changes, the weather changes. To make a perfect soup each and every time is like thinking the weather should be each and every time the same. So it's an acceptance, and again, knowing that the intention was to do the best. And yes, I think, a lot of us demand a lot of ourselves, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing. It's how far do we take it? So I am sure that we're all on these different levels, so to speak. of where we are with this self-talk, where we are with how do we speak to ourselves, how do we be kind to ourselves. And being kind, it would be like just if somebody, your child does something and it's an accident, it's certainly not intentional, we're not going to beat that child up. So it's looking at it from that point of view, like how is this working and how does this feel to beat ourselves up? And basically, again, it just comes down to, our childhood, a lot of it, and the things we did hear throughout our childhood, whether it was from parents, teachers, I've said this already, how did that impact us? But now and today, as an adult, it's been through lifetimes, it's been through the majority or a lot of this lifetime at this point, I ask myself, do I need to keep doing this? How is this enhancing my life? It isn't. Yet, it's a program. So that awareness is the first thing, to really become aware of the whole thing around the self-talk. And as we become aware, at least for me, as I'm becoming aware, I'm becoming more compassionate for myself, saying, okay, I'm suffering when I do this, and just kind of feeling my way through this challenge is what I'm doing. And it is a challenge. And it does take a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of joy out of life. And it has to be dealt with. So if it wasn't an issue, it wouldn't be coming up right now. That's the other thing I tell myself, is this is coming up, it's great, it's coming up for me to be able to look at this and decide what I want to do with it. Or at least to look at it and become aware of it, if nothing else. So I think that's about all I really want to brainstorm about with this today, because I don't have anywhere else to go other than to make all of us aware of our self-talk, which I'm sure we all are. Yeah, but to become aware of, when are we doing it and why, and to see if we can look deeper and unravel, peel the onion, and try to move into a more of a self-care, being kind to ourselves. When we see something we didn't like that we did, we're disappointed in something that has to do with us, to be able to have the compassion, like maybe we would for even a stranger. So that's another way to look at it. But it's practice. It truly is practice and awareness, practice and awareness. But I definitely feel in today's world, man, we got to do this. I mean, I'm not sure, but I think a lot of the younger adults today, young people, who are really struggling with the drugs and the alcohol, the addictions, because it's so serious today. I'm believing that this is coming from self-talk, and that this self-talk has been going on for who knows how long, and kids that grew up with a lot of bullying. I mean, it's a serious problem. It really is. It's a serious problem. I think it's a source of suicide for people. Yeah. So I think it deserves conversation. So that's what I'm beginning today, just to try to bring it up in the best way I can. And see where that goes. See maybe what some of us can take away from this. Love to hear any comments or what you found for yourself. This would be a great conversation to have, I think, with others about this whole thing of self-talk, and really share, which allows us to be vulnerable, share how we've either dealt with it or dealing with it, and help one another, try to help one another through this. So we'll talk about it some more, but again, I just wanted to bring it up today. It's been on my mind. It's something I'm working on, and hopefully it's something that's helped someone either to work on themselves, get motivated, or at least become somewhat aware of what their self-talk is about for them. So, if you liked this video, I'd love to ask you to hit like and also to subscribe to my channel, and to definitely let me know if you'd like to have a conversation about this subject or any other subject that we could record on Zoom, and then put it on this channel and maybe start to get that off the ground and see where it goes. In the meantime, be kind to yourself, you know. Try it. Think about it. Yeah, let this become something that is on your mind. You know, what's your intention? And when you start to really beat yourself up verbally, see if you can just stop, take a breath in that moment, and look a little deeper and feel what it feels like to be the receiver of the abusive verbal abuse. So that's my message today. So until next time, take care. Now I'm going to see if I can make this click go off in the first click, and I'm not going to beat myself up if I don't.